The rain fell like bullets that night in Seoul, cold and unforgiving. Jin-woo collapsed against the alley wall, blood mixing with rainwater at his feet. He was 17, starving and dying, not from the knife wound in his side, but from the slow poison of poverty that had been killing him since birth. That's when she found him. Amara shouldn't have been in that part of Itaewon after dark. A black girl alone, working 2 jobs just to afford the cramped room she shared with 3 other foreign students. She knew better. But something made her turn down that alley. Something made her kneel beside a boy whose eyes held more pain than any 17-year-old should carry. "Please," he whispered in broken English. "Just leave me." He didn't. With her last 10,000 won, the money she needed for tomorrow's meal, she bought him food. With hands that trembled from fear and exhaustion, she cleaned his wound. And when he cried, not from pain, but from the unbearable kindness of a stranger, she stayed. "Why?" he asked her in Korean, which she barely understood. "Because someone should," she answered. Before dawn he took her hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes burned with something fierce and unbreakable. "Wait for me," he said, switching to the English he'd taught himself from stolen books. "I have nothing now. Am nothing. But wait for me. One day I'll come back." She smiled sadly, the way you smile at beautiful lies. "Okay. Promise me," he insisted. "I promise." When the sun rose, he was gone. She told herself she'd never see him again. She told herself it was just a moment, a mistake, a kindness that meant nothing. She was wrong. She waited. But when he returned 7 years later, he wasn't a boy anymore. He was the most dangerous man in Seoul, and he had come to keep his promise. Speech balloon if you believe promises should be kept, like this video right now. Writing hen medium skintun comment waiting, if you would have waited for him. Bell and subscribe for more emotional Mafia stories you won't find anywhere else. Jin-woo had learned hunger before he learned to read. Born in a basement apartment in Gyeongdong, the forgotten corner of Seoul where dreams went to suffocate, he knew poverty with an intimacy most people reserve for love. His mother had disappeared when he was 9, probably dead, possibly escaped. His father drank away what little money they had, then drank away his liver, leaving Jin-woo completely alone at 15. The city didn't care. Seoul glittered and pulsed with wealth, but not for boys like him. He slept in PC bangs when he had coins, in subway stations when he didn't. He stole food from convenience stores, ran from security guards, and took beatings from older street kids who saw him as competition. By 17, he had been invisible so long he wondered if he even existed at all. The night Amara found him, he had made a mistake. Desperate and starving, he'd tried to steal from the wrong person, a mid-level enforcer for the Baek Dupa, one of Seoul's most vicious crime families. The man had smiled while he stabbed Jin-woo, leaning close to whisper, "Die quietly, rat." Jin-woo had crawled into that alley to do exactly that. He had nothing. He was nothing. The world had already given up on him. He was ready to give up on himself. Then she appeared and everything changed. Amara Johnson had come to Korea chasing a dream that already felt like a lie. The K-pop Academy had promised training, opportunity, a chance. What they delivered was exploitation. 12-hour days, verbal abuse disguised as coaching, and barely enough pay to survive. But she'd used her savings, burned her bridges back home in Atlanta, and told her mother she was going to make it. Pride wouldn't let her quit. Stubbornness wouldn't let her fail. She worked at a convenience store during graveyard shifts and cleaned offices before dawn. She lived on triangle kimbap and black coffee. She ignored the stares, the comments, the way some Koreans looked at her like she didn't belong. She'd heard it all before. Back home she wasn't black enough. Here she was too black. Nowhere felt like home, so she'd stopped looking for one. But loneliness has a way of making you reckless with kindness. When she saw Jin-woo bleeding in that alley, she didn't see a stranger. She saw herself, someone the world had decided wasn't worth saving. She saw pain she recognized, abandonment she understood. So she made a choice that would change both their lives forever. She didn't walk away. The convenience store clerk gave Amara a suspicious look when she bought the instant ramen, the bandages, and the small bottle of soju for disinfectant. She didn't care. She heated the noodles in the store's microwave and carried everything back to the alley where Jin-woo sat shivering against the wall. He tried to refuse. You don't understand. Dangerous. They could come back. Then we should hurry, she said simply, kneeling beside him. She wasn't a nurse. Her hands shook as she cleaned the knife wound with soju that made him hiss through clenched teeth. The cut wasn't deep enough to kill him, but infection could. She used her scarf, a cheap thing from Dongdaemun Market, but it was clean, to wrap the wound tightly. Then she handed him the ramen. Jin-woo stared at the cup like it was a hallucination. When was the last time someone had given him food instead of chasing him away from it? His hands trembled so badly that noodles spilled over the side. He started eating too fast, choking, tears streaming down his face. Slow down, Amara said gently, placing her hand on his arm. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. She wasn't Korean. She was beautiful in a way that made his broken heart hurt more. And she was kind. Kindness was rarer than wealth in his world. More valuable than gold. Why you help? He asked in halting English. She thought about lying, about saying something noble. Instead she told the truth. Because I know what it's like when nobody does. In that moment, over cheap ramen in a dirty alley, something impossible began. Not love, not yet. But recognition. Two people who didn't belong anywhere, finding each other in the dark. They talked until the sky began to lighten. Jin-woo's English was rough but determined. Amara's Korean was almost non-existent, but they made it work through gestures, drawings in the dirt, and the universal language of shared suffering. He told her about his mother's disappearance, his father's death, the years of invisibility. She told him about Atlanta, her family's disapproval of her dreams, the academy that chewed up foreign girls and spit them out. They were strangers, but they understood each other better than people they'd known for years. As dawn approached, Jin-woo knew he had to leave. The Baek Du-pa enforcer would realize he wasn't dead. Staying near Amara would put her in danger. But before he left, he needed to say something. Something that felt insane, impossible, but absolutely necessary. He took her hand. His was rough, scarred, dirty. Hers was warm and steady. I will change, he said, each word careful and deliberate. I have nothing now. Am nothing. But I will become something. When you. I will survive. Amara smiled sadly. She'd heard promises before. They always broke. It's okay, she said. You don't have to. Wait for me, he interrupted. His voice fierce despite his weakness. Wait for me. I will come back. I promise. She should have laughed. Should have told him he was delirious from blood loss. But his eyes held something she'd never seen before. Not hope exactly. Determination. The kind that bent reality. Okay, she whispered. I'll wait. Promise. I promise. He squeezed her hand once, stood with obvious pain, and disappeared into the breaking dawn. Amara sat in that alley until full morning, wondering if she'd imagined the whole thing. Wondering if she'd just made the stupidest promise of her life. She had no idea she'd made the most important one. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Amara returned to that alley twice, feeling foolish both times. Of course he was gone. Of course he'd forgotten. It had been a moment of crisis, nothing more. She'd helped a stranger, and he'd said beautiful words he didn't mean. She tried to forget him. She couldn't. His eyes stayed with her. That fierce promise, spoken with nothing but will and desperation. She found herself thinking about him at random moments, wondering if he was alive, if he was safe, if he ever thought about the foreign girl who'd given him ramen and her last bit of money. A year passed. The academy finally fell apart, exposed for the predatory scam it was. Amara should have gone home, but stubbornness kept her in Seoul. She found work at a restaurant in Hongdae, started taking Korean classes seriously, built a small life from scraps. 2 years passed. She dated briefly. A kind English teacher who bored her, a musician who cheated. Neither made her feel what she'd felt in that alley with a bleeding stranger. She told herself she wasn't waiting, not really. She was just living. 3 years passed. She stopped consciously thinking about him. The memory faded to a story she told herself sometimes, late at night when loneliness pressed too heavy. 7 years passed. Amara was 28 now, managing a small cafe in Itaewon. She'd found her place, built a community, made Seoul home. She rarely thought about that rainy night anymore. That's when he came back. Before Jin-woo's return, the 3 years leading up to it had tested Amara in ways that nearly broke her. The restaurant she'd worked at closed suddenly, leaving her with 2 months of unpaid wages. Her landlord sold the building, forcing her to find new housing in a market that had become brutally expensive. She borrowed money from a private lender, a mistake she realized too late when the interest rates revealed themselves as predatory. The debt doubled, then tripled. She worked 3 jobs. Morning shift at a cafe, evening shift teaching English online, late nights bartending. She sent nothing home to Atlanta, which meant her mother's disappointed silence grew heavier across the ocean. But she survived. Amara had learned survival long before Seoul, growing up poor in Atlanta, watching her mother work 2 jobs, understanding early that the world didn't hand you anything. You took it or you went without. She eventually found the cafe manager position in Itaewon, which came with decent pay and a tiny room above the shop. She paid down her debts slowly, methodically. She built a life that was small but hers. Yet something remained hollow. She dated but never seriously. Made friends but kept them at a distance. Built walls that kept her safe and desperately alone. Sometimes late at night she'd remember that promise. A boy's fierce eyes in a rainy alley. Wait for me. She'd waited. He never came. And she told herself she was fine with that. She was lying. The boy who collapsed in that alley died the same night Amara saved him. What emerged from the shadows of Seoul was something else entirely. Forged in violence, tempered in blood, sharpened into a weapon the Korean underworld would learn to fear. Jin-woo's survival instinct led him to the one place that accepted disposable people. The gangs. But he didn't join the Baek Du-pa who had tried to kill him. Instead, he found their rivals, the Jeonbong faction, and offered himself as a weapon with nothing to lose. They tested him immediately. Beat him to see if he'd break. He didn't. Sent him on suicide missions to see if he'd run. He didn't. Made him do things that would have shattered most men. He survived them all, not through strength, but through something more dangerous. Absolute will. He remembered her eyes, her kindness, her promise. And he used that memory like armor against everything they threw at him. By 20, Jin-woo had earned a reputation for efficiency and ruthlessness. By 22, he'd orchestrated a takeover that eliminated 3 rival factions in a single night of coordinated violence. By 24, he sat at the table where decisions about Seoul's underground were made. But it wasn't enough. He needed more. Because the promise he'd made wasn't just about surviving, it was about becoming someone worthy of the girl who'd saved him when he was nothing. At 25, Jin-woo made his final move. He challenged the Jeonbong boss during a leadership crisis, presenting evidence of the man's betrayal to their Yakuza partners. The boss died that night. Officially a suicide. Unofficially, the last person he saw was Jin-woo's face. At 25, Jin-woo became what Seoul's underworld whispered about in careful voices. The ghost of Jeonbong, the youngest mafia boss in 3 generations, the man who had climbed from absolute nothing to absolute power. But he never forgot why. The Jeonbong faction under Jin-woo's leadership became something different. Martyr. More disciplined. More terrifying. He cut the random violence that drew police attention and focused on the profitable shadows. Protection, information, legitimate businesses with illegitimate roots. His men feared him, but they also respected him. Jin-woo never asked them to do what he wouldn't do himself. The scars on his body weren't decorative. They were a map of every lesson he'd learned climbing to power. He ate with his soldiers, fought beside them when necessary, and punished betrayal with swift finality. The other factions learned quickly. You could negotiate with a ghost, but you couldn't intimidate him. You could make deals, but you couldn't make him blink. He'd come from nothing, which meant he feared losing nothing. That made him more dangerous than bosses who'd inherited power and lived in fear of losing it. His headquarters wasn't a flashy nightclub or obvious front. It was an unassuming office building in Gangnam, the kind of place you'd walk past 100 times without noticing. Inside it was clean, efficient, and modern. Jin-woo ran his empire like a corporation because he understood something other bosses didn't. The future of the underworld wasn't in street violence. It was in invisible networks, digital currency, and political connections. By his 7th year in power, at 25, Jin-woo had built something that would last. Money flowed through legitimate and illegitimate channels. Politicians owed him favors. Police looked the other way for the right price. He was untouchable. Almost. The one thing he couldn't control was the hollow feeling that never left. Success meant nothing without the one person who'd seen him at his worst and chose kindness anyway. It was time to keep his promise. Jin-woo kept a locked drawer in his private office. Inside, a faded scarf that smelled like nothing anymore, and a photograph he'd obtained 3 years ago from a private investigator. Amara, laughing at a cafe, unaware she was being watched. Beautiful. Live. He'd known her location for years but forced himself to wait. Wait until he was truly someone. Wait until he could give her the world instead of just survival. Wait until he was worthy of the promise. Now he was ready. Find everything, he told his most trusted lieutenant Min-jun. Where she works, where she lives, who she talks to, who she owes money to. Everything. And be invisible about it. Min-jun, a former intelligence officer who'd found more money in crime than patriotism, delivered a complete file within 48 hours. Jin-woo read it in his office, alone, as Seoul glittered outside his windows. Amara Johnson, 28, cafe manager in Itaewon, living alone, no serious relationships, debt nearly paid off. By all accounts surviving but not thriving. His jaw clenched. She'd waited. Maybe not for him specifically, but she'd never built a life with someone else. Never married. Never moved on completely. The universe had kept her for him. Prepare a car, Jin-woo ordered. And Min-jun. This one is personal. No mistakes. No witnesses. No one touches her. Spread the word through every faction. The foreign woman in Itaewon is under my protection. Anyone who even looks at her wrong answers to me directly. Understood, boss. Jin-woo looked at the photograph one more time. 7 years. He'd promised to come back. He'd promised to be someone. Now he'd keep both promises. Amara noticed the black Genesis sedan on Tuesday. It was parked across from the cafe, windows tinted dark, engine running. She noticed because luxury cars didn't idle in her neighborhood. They passed through on their way to somewhere important. Wednesday it was back. Same spot. Same car. Different driver, she thought, though she couldn't see through the windows. Thursday, a man in an expensive suit came into the cafe. He ordered an Americano, sat by the window, and didn't touch his phone once, just watched the street. When he left, he tipped 50,000 won on a 4,500 won coffee. Friday, Amara's instincts screamed that something was wrong. She'd lived in Seoul long enough to recognize gang activity when she saw it. The expensive car. The watching. The excessive tip that felt like a message. Someone was either interested in the cafe for protection money, or interested in her for reasons she didn't want to consider. She thought about going to the police, but years in Korea had taught her that sometimes the police couldn't, or wouldn't, help. Especially not foreign women in Itaewon. Especially not against people who drove cars that cost more than her annual salary. Saturday she made a decision. If they were coming for her, she wouldn't make it easy. She kept a knife from the cafe kitchen in her bag. She mapped alternate routes from work to home. She told her co-worker Jiun that if anything happened, call the embassy. Sunday the cafe was closed. Amara stayed in her small room above the shop, looking out the window at the street below. The black Genesis appeared at 8 p.m. exactly. This time a man stepped out. Even from a distance, even after 7 years, even though he moved differently now, with confidence instead of desperation, she knew. Her breath stopped. It couldn't be. But it was. Jin-woo stood on the street below her window, looking up like he knew exactly where she was. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her cafe's monthly rent. His hair was styled, his jaw sharp, his posture radiating controlled power. He looked nothing like the bleeding boy from the alley. He looked everything like the man he'd promised to become. Amara's hands shook as she gripped the windowsill. This wasn't possible. 7 years. 7 years of silence. And now he just appeared like a ghost made flesh. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Come down, Amara. Please. I kept my promise. She should have been angry. Should have told him to disappear back into whatever hole he'd crawled out of. Should have protected herself from whatever this was. Instead, she found herself walking down the stairs, her heart hammering so hard she felt it in her throat. She unlocked the cafe door and stepped outside. They stood 5 feet apart on the empty street. You, she whispered. Me, Jin-woo confirmed, his voice deeper now, carrying an edge of command that hadn't been there before. I thought you were dead. I thought. Her voice cracked. 7 years. 7 years, and not a word. I needed to become someone first, he said simply. You saved a boy with nothing. I couldn't come back until I was a man with everything. What are you talking about? But even as she asked, she understood. A suit. The way he held himself like someone used to obedience. What did you become? Jin-woo smiled, and it wasn't the smile of the desperate boy she remembered. It was darker, more dangerous. Someone who keeps promises, he said. Someone who never forgot the only person who showed him kindness. Someone who scares me, Amara interrupted, taking a step back. His smile faded. For a moment, she saw a flash of the boy underneath, vulnerable, hurt, desperate for her not to fear him. I would never hurt you, he said softly. You're the only thing in this world I wouldn't hurt. Then tell me the truth, she demanded. What are you now? Jin-woo met her eyes. I'm the head of the Jeonbong faction. I run half of Seoul's underground. I'm powerful, I'm wealthy, and I'm dangerous to everyone except you. The world tilted. You're a gangster. I'm a survivor, he corrected. Just like you. Amara laughed, but it came out broken. A survivor. You're a criminal. You're God, you're the Mafia. Yes, Jin-woo said, not defending himself, just acknowledging the truth. And you came back for what? To drag me into that world. To give you everything, he interrupted. To repay the debt I owe you. To prove that I meant every word I said 7 years ago. I don't want your money. She was shouting now. 7 years of waiting and wondering and trying to forget, spilling out in anger. I don't want anything from whatever you've become. Then what do you want? His voice rose to match hers, frustration breaking through his control. To keep working yourself to death in that cafe. To keep living in a room the size of a closet. To keep pretending you're fine when I know you're barely surviving. At least I'm surviving clean, she shot back. How many people have you hurt? How many people have you? She couldn't finish the question. Jin-woo's expression went cold. Do you want the truth? I've hurt a lot of people. I've done things that would make you sick. I've built my empire on violence and fear and choices I can't take back. Amara felt tears burning her eyes. The boy she'd saved was gone. This man standing before her was a stranger. But, Jin-woo continued, his voice dropping to something raw and honest, I did it all to keep my promise to you. Every choice, every sacrifice, every terrible thing. It was to become someone worthy of your kindness. You saved my life, Amara. You gave me a reason to survive when I had nothing. Did you think I'd forget that? Did you think I'd let that debt go unpaid? I didn't save you so you could become a monster, she whispered. Jin-woo flinched like she'd struck him. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, maybe. But you saved me anyway. And I'm here now, offering you a choice. You can walk away. Go back to your life. I'll make sure you're protected, that your debt disappears, that you're safe. Or what? Or you give me a chance to show you that the boy you saved is still in here somewhere. He pressed his hand to his chest. Still waiting for you. Still keeping his promise. Amara looked at him, really looked at him. Past the expensive suit and the dangerous edge. And God help her, she saw it. That desperate, fierce boy in the rain. Still there. Still waiting. I need time, she said finally. Jin-woo nodded. Take it. I've waited 7 years. I can wait longer. He turned to leave, then paused. Your debt is paid, by the way. The lender won't be contacting you again. And if anyone gives you trouble, anyone at all, you call this number. He handed her a card. I'll come. Then he walked away, disappearing into the black Genesis, leaving Amara standing alone on the empty street with her whole world turned upside down. 3 days later, Amara called the number. Not because she'd decided anything, but because she had questions, and Jin-woo was the only one with answers. They met at a park in Hongang, neutral territory, daylight hours. He came alone without the car, wearing jeans and a simple black shirt. Trying, she realized, to look less dangerous. Didn't work. Danger clung to him now like a second skin. Why me? She asked without preamble. 7 years ago, I was just a stranger. Why build your whole life around that one night? Jin-woo was quiet for a moment, watching the river. Do you know what it's like to be invisible? To live in a city of millions and have nobody see you? I was dying that night, Amara. Not just from the knife wound. From loneliness. From the certainty that I didn't matter to anyone. And then you appeared. A stranger who had every reason to walk away. You didn't just give me food or bandages. You saw me. You treated me like a human being who deserved kindness. Do you understand how rare that is? Especially in my world. Amara swallowed hard. So this is about gratitude. No, Jin-woo said sharply, turning to face her. This is about the fact that you were the reason I survived. Not just that night, every night after. When things got dark, when I had to make terrible choices, when I questioned whether I was becoming something irredeemable, I thought about you. About the person I wanted to be for you. I'm not some fantasy girl from your past, Amara protested. I'm just. You're everything, Jin-woo interrupted. You're the proof that kindness exists in a cruel world. You're the one pure thing I've ever known. And I know I'm not pure anymore. I know I'm stained by what I've become. But I'm here anyway, because I'd rather fail honestly than spend the rest of my life wondering if you could have loved me despite my sins. The raw vulnerability in his voice undid something in Amara's chest. I don't know if I can be part of your world, she said quietly. I'm not asking you to be, Jin-woo replied. I'm asking you to let me be part of yours. To let me protect you, provide for you, and prove that I'm still capable of being the man you deserved 7 years ago. And if I can't, if I try and realize I can't live with what you do, then I'll let you go, he said simply. But at least I'll have tried. At least I'll have kept my promise. Amara looked at this complicated, dangerous, broken man who'd somehow kept her in his heart for 7 years. And made a decision that terrified her. Okay, she whispered. Show me. Amara learned quickly that loving someone like Jin-woo came with consequences. The first arrived 1 week after she agreed to see him. She was closing the cafe when 2 men entered. They didn't look like customers. They looked like enforcers from a rival faction, the kind of men who hurt people for a living. You're the boss's woman, one said in Korean. Not a question. An accusation. Amara's hand moved to her phone, but the second man was faster. He grabbed her wrist, squeezing hard enough to bruise. Send him a message, the first man continued. The Bec du Pas don't forget. 7 years ago he killed one of ours. Now we kill something of his. Terror flooded Amara's veins, but she forced herself to stay calm. I don't know what you're talking about. Lying bitch. The cafe door slammed open. Min-jun entered with 3 other Jeonbong soldiers. The transformation was immediate. The rival enforcers released Amara and reached for weapons they'd never have time to draw. The boss said she's untouchable, Min-jun said quietly, his voice carrying more threat than any shout. Did you think that was a suggestion? This isn't your territory. Everywhere she breathes is our territory now, Min-jun interrupted. You have 5 seconds to leave before I forget the boss wants this handled quietly. The Bec du Pas men hesitated, calculated, and made the smart choice. They left. Amara's legs gave out. She sat hard on the cafe floor, shaking. Min-jun approached carefully. Are you hurt? No. How did you know? The boss has people watching. Always. He said you'd be angry if you knew, but better angry than dead. Min-jun's expression softened slightly. He's been waiting 7 years. He's not going to lose you now because of some Bec du Pas revenge fantasy. Amara laughed weakly. This is insane. Yes, Min-jun agreed. But you're alive. And those men will think twice before coming near you again. When Jin-woo arrived 20 minutes later, Amara saw something she'd never seen before. Fear. Real, raw fear that he'd been too late. I'm fine, she said before he could speak. You're not fine. They touched you. They threatened you. Because of me. Because of them, Amara corrected. Because they made a choice to come after me. That's not on you. Jin-woo pulled her into his arms, and she felt him trembling. I can't lose you. Not when I just found you again. Then keep me safe, Amara whispered against his chest. But don't treat me like I'm made of glass. I survived 7 years in this city alone. I'm stronger than you think. I know, he said softly. That's why I fell in love with you. The Bec du Pas retaliation came swift and brutal, but it didn't touch Amara. Jin-woo made sure of that. The next morning, the 2 men who'd threatened her were found in an alley in Gangnam, alive, but beaten badly enough to require hospitalization. The message was clear. Touch what's mine and you'll pray for death. But Jin-woo didn't stop there. He called a meeting with the heads of Seoul's major factions, something that hadn't happened in 5 years. In the neutral territory of a private room at a high-end restaurant, he laid out new terms. The foreign woman in Itaewon is mine, he said simply. She's not a target. She's not leverage. She's not even a topic of conversation. Anyone who violates this rule doesn't get a warning. They get erased. The Bec du Pas boss, an older man named Park who'd been in the game for 30 years, laughed. You're claiming territory over a woman. That's not how this works. Jin-woo's expression didn't change. I'm not claiming territory. I'm drawing a line. Cross it and we go to war. For war. No more gentlemen's agreements. No more neutral territories. No more profit-sharing arrangements. Just blood. Over one woman. Over the one woman who matters, Jin-woo corrected. The one thing in this world I value more than power or money or my own life. So yes, Park Isasai. Over one woman, I will burn this entire city down. The silence that followed was absolute. Park studied Jin-woo for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Understood. The Bec du Pas will respect this arrangement. Good, Jin-woo said. Because if they don't, you'll be the first person I kill. Later Min-jun asked him privately. Was that wise? Showing them your weakness. She's not my weakness, Jin-woo replied. She's my strength. And now they know that hurting her means war they can't win. That's not weakness. That's the smartest move I've ever made. 2 weeks later, Amara woke up screaming from a nightmare. In it, Jin-woo stood over bodies, blood on his hands, asking her if she still loved him. She couldn't shake the image. At breakfast with Jiun, her coworker asked casually, "So who's the guy in the expensive suits picking you up after work?" "It's complicated," Amara said. "Complicated like he's married, or complicated like he's Yakuza." The accuracy of the guess made Amara's stomach drop. Jiun noticed her expression and sighed. "Uni, I've lived here my whole life. I know what men like him do. And I know what happens to the women who love them." "What happens?" "They get hurt. Or they become complicit. Or both." That night, Amara told Jin-woo she needed space. They were in his apartment, a stunning penthouse in Gangnam that made her cafe look like a closet. He'd been showing her plans for a new restaurant he wanted to open in her name. Plans that assumed a future together. "I can't do this," she said quietly. "Every time you touch me, I wonder if those hands have killed someone. Every time you promise me safety, I wonder who died to guarantee it. I can't live like this." Jin-woo set down the blueprints slowly. "So you're leaving?" "I think I have to. Because you don't love me. Or because you do." The question cut too close to the truth. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me," Jin-woo said. "If you don't love me, then I'll let you go and hate myself for wasting your time. But if you do love me and you're running because you're scared, that's different. That's something we can work through." "You can't just work through murder, Jin-woo. You can't fix that with love and good intentions." "I never said I could fix it," he replied. "I know what I am. I know what I've done. But I also know that loving you is the only good thing I've ever done. And if you walk away, I'll lose the one part of me that's still human." Amara felt tears sliding down her face. "I can't be responsible for your humanity. That's too much weight." "I'm not asking you to carry it," Jin-woo said, moving closer but not touching her. "I'm asking you to witness it. To see that I'm still trying. Still fighting to be someone worthy of you. Isn't that worth something?" "I don't know," Amara whispered. "I don't know anything anymore." "Then stay," Jin-woo said. "Stay and figure it out. But don't run because you're scared. Run because it's really what you want." Amara looked at him, this dangerous, broken, desperately in love man, and couldn't make herself leave. Not yet. Jin-woo didn't sleep well. Amara learned this one night when she stayed over and woke at 3 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty. She found him standing at the window, shirtless, staring out at Seoul's glittering skyline. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. He didn't turn around. "I never sleep well. Too many ghosts." Amara moved to stand beside him. In the reflection of the window, she could see scars crossing his torso, some old, some relatively new. A map of violence that made her heart ache. "Tell me about them," she said. "The scars. The ghosts." Jin-woo was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "The first man I killed was named Sungmin. He was 23. He'd been sent to kill me because I was rising too fast, threatening the old guard. It was him or me. I chose me," he continued. "I've chosen me every time since. And I don't regret it because regretting it would mean wishing I was dead. But I remember them. Every single one. Their faces. The moment they realized they'd lost. His voice cracked. Amara took his hand. It was shaking. "I'm a monster," Jin-woo said flatly. "You were right about that. And the worst part is that I'd do it all again. Because all of it led to this moment. To you. And I'm selfish enough to think you're worth every sin I've committed." "Don't put that on me," Amara said. "I didn't ask you to become this. I know. But you asked me to survive. And this is what survival cost." He finally turned to look at her, and his eyes were wet. "Do you know what it's like to love someone so pure when you're so stained? It's like standing in darkness and seeing light for the first time. Hurts. But it also makes you remember you're still alive." Amara pulled him down to her, wrapping her arms around him as he finally broke. This powerful man who commanded Seoul's underworld, crying against her shoulder like the boy she'd found in the alley. "I'm not pure," she whispered. I'm just as broken as you. I'm just broken in different ways. Then be broken with me, Jin-woo said. Be broken and whole and everything in between. Just don't leave. I won't, Amara promised. Not tonight. It wasn't forever. But it was enough. The decision came quietly, without fanfare or dramatic moments. Amara woke up one morning in Jin-woo's bed, watching him sleep. His face was peaceful in sleep in a way it never was awake. Younger. Almost innocent. She traced the scar on his shoulder, the one from that night 7 years ago, and realized something fundamental. She'd already chosen him. Maybe she'd chosen him in that alley when she'd used her last money to feed a stranger. Maybe she'd chosen him when she'd made that impossible promise to wait. Maybe she'd chosen him every day for 7 years without realizing it. The question wasn't whether to love him. The question was whether to keep fighting it. She was tired of fighting. When Jin-woo woke, she was still watching him. What? He asked, voice rough with sleep. I love you, Amara said simply. I love you and I'm terrified and I have no idea how this works. But I choose you anyway. Jin-woo went very still. Say that again. I love. He kissed her before she could finish, pulling her against him with a desperation that spoke of 7 years of waiting. When they finally broke apart, he was smiling, really smiling, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. I'll protect you, he promised. I'll keep you safe. I'll give you everything. I don't need everything, Amara said. I just need you. The real you. Not the boss, not the power. Just the boy who promised to come back. He's still here, Jin-woo whispered. He never left. They spent the morning in bed, talking about futures that seemed impossible. Jin-woo wanted to legitimize more of his business, create distance between Amara and the violence. She wanted to expand the cafe, maybe open a second location. Normal dreams built on abnormal foundations. We'll make it work, Jin-woo said with absolute certainty. How can you be so sure? Because I've spent 7 years building an empire. If I can do that, I can figure out how to love you without destroying you. Amara laughed. That's a low bar. Maybe. But I'll clear it anyway. For the first time in 7 years, Amara felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. The attack came from inside. Lee Jae-sung had been Jin-woo's third-in-command for 4 years. Loyal, efficient, profitable. Jin-woo had trusted him with territory, money, and secrets. That trust was a mistake. Jae-sung had been working with the Baek Dupa for 8 months, feeding them information about Jeonbong operations. The plan was elegant. Stage a takeover during a planned meeting, kill Jin-woo, and install Jae-sung as a puppet boss who'd merge the factions under Baek Dupa control. They'd planned for everything except one variable. Amara. The meeting was scheduled for a warehouse in Incheon, neutral territory, standard monthly gathering of Jin-woo's lieutenants. Jin-woo had left Amara at his penthouse with Min-jun standing guard, telling her he'd be back by midnight. At 10 p.m., Jae-sung's men hit the penthouse. Min-jun killed 3 before they overwhelmed him through numbers. He managed to trigger a silent alarm before a bullet tore through his shoulder, dropping him. Amara heard the gunshots and did the smartest thing possible. She ran. Not for the door that was blocked. Instead, she locked herself in Jin-woo's office and used the panic button he'd shown her once, saying he hoped she'd never need it. The signal went directly to Jin-woo's phone during the middle of the meeting. He looked at the screen, saw the alert, felt his blood turn to ice. Meeting's over, he said quietly. Jae-sung made his move. Actually, boss, I think we should. Jin-woo shot him in the chest without hesitation. Before anyone could react, he was moving, out the door into his car, calling every available soldier to converge on the penthouse. The drive from Incheon to Gangnam normally took 40 minutes. Jin-woo made it in 20, treating traffic laws as suggestions and his car as a weapon. Jin-woo arrived to chaos. His men and Jae-sung's traitors were engaged in a firefight in the lobby. He didn't stop to coordinate or strategize. He went straight for the elevator, killing anyone in his path with mechanical efficiency. The penthouse door was blown open. Min-jun lay bleeding but alive in the entrance. "Office," he gasped. She locked herself. Jin-woo found 4 men trying to break down his office door. They died before they could turn around. "Amara!" he shouted, pounding on the reinforced door. "It's me. Open up." "Silence. Amara, please." "Safe. I'm here." The lock clicked. The door opened slowly. Amara stood there, holding a gun she'd taken from his desk. Safety still on, grip wrong but the intent clear. She was prepared to fight. When she saw him, covered in blood that wasn't his, she dropped the gun and collapsed into his arms. I thought they'd kill you," she sobbed. "I thought I'd lose you." "Never," Jin-woo said fiercely, holding her so tightly it must have hurt. "I will never leave you. I promised, remember." Behind them, the sounds of fighting had stopped. Jin-woo's men had won, the traitors dead or captured, the attempted coup crushed before it could fully form. But Jin-woo didn't care about any of that. His entire world was the woman shaking in his arms. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. This is exactly what you were afraid of. What I promised wouldn't happen." "You came back," Amara said, pulling away to look at him. "You came back for me. I'll always come back for you. Don't you understand? You're the only thing that matters." Later, after Min-jun was rushed to a hospital and the bodies were cleared, after statements were given and loyalty was reaffirmed, Jin-woo sat with Amara in his blood-stained penthouse and made a decision. "I'm getting out," he said. Amara blinked. "What?" "Not immediately. It'll take time, a year, maybe 2. But I'm transitioning to legitimate business only. No more underworld. No more violence. I'm getting out because I refuse to risk you again." "Jin-woo, you can't just." "Yes, I can," he interrupted. "I built this empire. I can dismantle it, or transform it, or hand it off to someone else. I don't care. All I care about is a future where you're safe." Amara stared at him. "You'd really give it all up?" "I'd give up everything for you," Jin-woo said simply. "Haven't you realized that yet?" Before Jin-woo could transform into something new, he had to deal with what he still was, the head of Seoul's most powerful criminal faction. And heads of criminal factions didn't forgive betrayal. The interrogation of Jae-sung's surviving conspirators was swift and brutal. Jin-woo didn't participate. He never did, believing leaders should delegate torture. But he reviewed the findings personally. The Baek Du-pa had orchestrated everything, using Jae-sung's ambition as leverage. They'd promised him power, territory, and protection. They'd lied, of course. Jae-sung would have been dead within a month of the takeover. But ambition makes people stupid. Jin-woo called another meeting with Park, the Baek Du-pa boss. They met in the same restaurant as before, same private room. But this time the atmosphere was different. Colder. More dangerous. "You broke our agreement," Jin-woo said without preamble. "You targeted my woman." Park spread his hands. "We targeted you. She was collateral." "There is no collateral where she's concerned. There's only sacred ground you chose to desecrate." "What do you want?" Park asked. "An apology. Compensation." "I want your territory," Jin-woo said calmly. "All of it. Itaewon, Gangnam, Hongdae. Every inch you control. You have 1 week to vacate before I take it by force." Park laughed. "You're insane. I'm not handing over." "You attempted to kill the woman I love," Jin-woo interrupted, his voice dropping to something deadly quiet. "You tried to make me live in a world without her. So now you'll live in a world without power, without territory, without the empire you've spent 30 years building. Fair trade, don't you think? This is war." "No," Jin-woo corrected. "War implies 2 equal forces in conflict. This is extermination. You have 1 week." Park left the meeting shaking with rage, but he also left with the knowledge that Jin-woo meant every word. Within 3 days, smaller Baek Du-pa operations began surrendering territory. Within 5 days, Park's own lieutenants were negotiating separate deals to avoid the bloodbath. On day 7, Park himself came to Jin-woo's office and signed over control of his faction. "I'll remember this," Park said as he left. "Good," Jin-woo replied. "Remember it every day. Remember that this is what happens when you threaten what's mine." The consolidation of Baekdu-pa territory took 3 months. Jin-woo handled it with characteristic efficiency, absorbing useful operations, shutting down others, redistributing power among his most loyal people. He also began the process he'd promised Amara, transitioning to legitimacy. Nightclubs became legal entertainment venues. Protection rackets became private security firms. Money laundering operations became real estate investment companies. It wasn't a clean transformation, it couldn't be, but it was a start. Amara watched this transformation with cautious hope. Jin-woo kept her informed of everything, refusing to hide the uglier aspects even when she asked him to. "You deserve honesty," he said. "If you're going to love me, you should know exactly what you're loving. Even the terrible parts. Especially the terrible parts." They settled into something resembling normalcy. Amara kept running her cafe. Jin-woo bought the building and forgave her rent, which led to their first serious fight about independence and pride. They compromised. She paid rent, but at a rate she could actually afford. Jin-woo spent less time in the underworld and more time learning how to be a legitimate businessman. It didn't come naturally. He was used to solving problems with fear and violence, not contracts and negotiations. But he learned, driven by the promise of a future with Amara. They had dinner together most nights, walked along the Han River on weekends, watched terrible dramas on Netflix and argued about which one was worse. Built a life from moments that were small and precious and normal. Min-jun recovered from his gunshot wound and became something of a friend to Amara. "You changed him," he said one day while guarding her cafe. "The boss I knew 2 years ago would have burned the city down over that attack. Instead he's trying to build something. That's because of you. Or in spite of me," Amara said. "No," Min-jun corrected. "Definitely because of you." 6 months after the attack, Jin-woo took Amara to the alley where they'd first met. It looked different in daylight. Smaller, less threatening. Just a forgotten space between buildings where 7 years ago, 2 broken people had found each other. "I've been thinking about this place a lot," Jin-woo said. "About who I was then and who I am now. And I think I'm finally becoming the person I promised to be. Not perfect, not clean, but someone worthy of your faith." Amara took his hand. "You've always been worthy. You just needed to believe it." "I believe it now," Jin-woo said. "Because you love me. And you have terrible taste in men, but excellent judgment in everything else." Amara laughed, and the sound echoed in the alley where she'd once saved a dying boy who'd grown into a dangerous man who'd become someone capable of love. 1 year after Jin-woo's return, he took Amara to Namsan Tower at sunset. Seoul spread out below them, glittering and alive and full of promise. "I have something for you," he said, pulling out a small box. Amara's heart stopped. "Jin-woo. It's not what you think," he said quickly. "Well, it is. But also more." Inside the box was a key. "That's not a ring," Amara said, confused. Jin-woo smiled. "Look at the keychain." Attached to the key was a small metal tag engraved with an address in Itaewon and a single word. "Ours. I bought the building next to your cafe," Jin-woo explained. "I'm turning it into a restaurant. The best Korean-American fusion restaurant in Seoul. And I want you to run it with me. Not as my employee or my charity case, but as my partner." Amara stared at the key, then at him. "You're serious? I kept my promise, didn't I? Came back. Became someone. Now I want to build something with you. Something that's not about my past or your survival, but about our future." "What about the other thing?" Amara asked, looking at the box. "The ring thing." Jin-woo got down on one knee, and Amara's breath caught. "I was going to wait," he said. "Be more romantic, plan something elaborate." But standing here, looking at this city where we both survived the impossible, I realize I've been waiting 7 years already. So, he pulled out a second box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a stone that caught the sunset like captured light. Amara Johnson, you saved my life when I was nothing. You waited when I had no right to ask. You loved me despite everything I've become. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worth the kindness you showed a stranger in an alley? Amara was crying, which made it hard to see the ring or Jinwoo's face or anything except the blur of 7 years of waiting and hoping and trying not to hope. Yes, she whispered. Yes, you absolute idiot. Of course, yes. Jinwoo slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like tears and laughter and promises kept. Below them, Seoul blazed with light. Above them, the sky turned purple and gold. And between them, 7 years of impossible love finally became real. The restaurant opened 6 months before their wedding. They called it Promise. Simple, direct, weighted with meaning only they fully understood. The menu was Amara's creation. Korean flavors through a southern lens, comfort food that bridged 2 cultures. Jinwoo handled the business side with the same efficiency he'd once used to run an empire, but now redirected toward liquor licenses and health inspections instead of territorial disputes. The opening was a success. Critics loved it. Customers lined up around the block. Within 3 months, they were turning people away, already planning a second location. Jinwoo had fully extricated himself from the underworld by then. Minjun had taken over leadership of what remained of Jeonbong operations, transitioning the rest toward legitimacy. The men who'd once followed Jinwoo into battle now ran security firms and nightclubs and import-export businesses that were, for the most part, legal. Do you miss it? Amara asked him one night after closing the restaurant. The power. Jinwoo considered. Sometimes. It's addictive being feared. But then I look at you, at this life we've built, and I realize I don't miss it at all. I was powerful. Now I'm happy. The second is rarer. Their wedding was small. 50 people in a garden in Jeju Island, a mix of Amara's friends and Jinwoo's legitimate business associates. Minjun stood as best man, looking uncomfortable in a suit. Jiun was maid of honor, still not entirely sure how her coworker had ended up marrying a former Mafia boss. Jinwoo's vows were simple. 7 years ago you saved my life. Every day since, you've saved my soul. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of both gifts. Amara's vows were equally direct. You promised to come back. You kept that promise and everyone after. I promise to keep choosing you, choosing us, for the rest of my life. They honeymooned in Bali, where no one knew Jinwoo's past and Amara could just be a woman in love. They swam in clear water, ate at beachside restaurants, and made love like the world had just been invented. When they returned to Seoul, they returned to a life that was theirs, built from nothing, sustained by everything they'd survived to get there. 5 years later, Amara stood in the original alley where it had all begun. It looked different now. The city had cleaned it up, added lighting, made it less threatening. But she could still see that rainy night if she closed her eyes. Could still see the bleeding boy who'd made an impossible promise. What are you doing here? She turned to find Jinwoo standing at the alley entrance, their 3-year-old daughter perched on his shoulders. Mina had her father's eyes and her mother's fearlessness, a combination that both terrified and delighted them. Just remembering, Amara said. Jinwoo walked over, and Mina reached for her mother. Amara took her daughter, feeling the solid weight of this small person who existed because a stranger had chosen kindness 7 years before she was born. Do you ever regret it? Jinwoo asked. Saving me that night. Amara looked at her husband, still dangerous, still scarred, but also gentle and present and so completely hers. She looked at their daughter, who would grow up safe and loved and never know poverty or abandonment. She thought about their restaurants, 3 now, their home in Hanam, their life that was messy and complicated and absolutely beautiful. Not even once, she said. Jinwoo smiled and pulled them both into his arms. The 3 of them stood in that alley where everything had started, where a promise had been made and kept and transformed into something neither of them could have imagined. I love you, Jin-woo whispered against her hair. I will always love you. Until the end. I know, Amara replied. You promised. And he had. 7 years ago, with nothing but desperation and hope, a boy had promised to return. He'd kept that promise. Then he'd kept every promise after. From poverty to power to peace. From strangers to soulmates to family. From nothing to everything. The promise had been kept. And it would last forever. Red heart, if this story moved you, tap the like button. It helps more people find it. Speech balloon comment, promise kept. If you believe true love always finds its way back. Bell subscribe for more Korean mafia boss stories, emotional romances, and powerful story times.